Hello everybody and welcome to the Cambridge Biomedical Campus Wellness Campaign. I am Jill Wilson, and wherever you are in the world today, welcome. As we always say, the desire and the need for wellness is universal, and these webinars are not just for the 20,000 plus people working on the Cambridge Biomedical Campus. They're for everyone. So please feel free to share the links far and wide. Now, today I have great pleasure in introducing Emma Tytherleigh. After starting to experience a range of perimenopausal symptoms at the age of 41, Emma set up the joyful Menopause and has spent the last 5 years researching and gathering knowledge on the perimenopause, in particular the effect it has on women's health. That's both physically and mentally. As a qualified personal trainer, she also has a focus on how exercise can make a significant difference to women in this phase of their life. So please put any questions as you think of them in the Q&A, and Emma will attempt to answer some of them after the presentation. So with no further ado, I'll hand over to her. Welcome, Emma.
Hello, thank you very much, Jill. Thank you for the introduction. So as Jill said, my name is Emma Tytherleigh and I'm a qualified personal trainer and fitness instructor based in Cambridge. I also have additional qualifications in exercise and nutrition for the menopause. And over the last 2 years, I've been working with women through my Joyful Menopause courses to help educate and support women through the menopause. So in this session today, I'm going to be focusing on how we can help to support women's physical and mental health during the menopause and into and throughout their third age, actually. So before I get into the bones of the presentation and tell you a little bit about me, I just wanted to invite you. There's been a lot of information in the media recently about the menopause, which is fantastic. You know, it's so good that it's a topic that's being discussed more openly now. Just for me to be able to gauge what the current sort of knowledge is, would you just mind popping in the chat, you know, what number you feel you are on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being, you know nothing about the menopause, and 10 being, you know, you're like Davina McCall, you know a lot about the menopause. So I just invite you now to pop a number in the chat. 5, yeah, brilliant. 2 to 3, great, 2. Lovely. 5, 7, 5, 7. Brilliant. Well, that's great. There's a real range there. And I'm going to come back to this again at the end of the presentation. So thank you very much for sharing. Now, why do I do what I do? Well, as Jill mentioned, 5 years ago, at the age of 41, I started to develop quite a few of the classic symptoms. So my mood was low. I was starting to feel a lot more anxious about things. My energy was really, really low, and I particularly noticed this after exercising, which was quite a shock to my system. My sleep became abysmal. I just didn't have any kind of quality sleep, and I'd wake up feeling exhausted every morning. And also I was having hot flushes day and night. But, you know, at the time, I had no idea. It didn't even cross my mind that it might be the menopause. So, you know, my husband was concerned that I might be ill. So he did encourage me to go to see the GP. And I went to see my GP, and she was very thorough. She did a smear test and she took bloods. And then she called me a week later and she said to me, you know, really good news, there's nothing seriously wrong with you, but it does look like you're nearly through your menopause. Now, this came as a real shock. I mean, I was absolutely delighted. It goes without saying that there was nothing seriously wrong with me. But to be told that I was nearly through my menopause at the age of 41, you know, I thought this happened to women in their mid-50s. I couldn't really process it. And I booked in to see the GP face-to-face and just to see if I could gather some more information. But, you know, I mean, bearing in mind, this was 5 years ago and things have moved on a lot since then. There wasn't really an awful lot she could offer me in terms of information or point me in the direction of support. So I suddenly felt really lost and plunged into this new phase of life without anyone there by my side, if you like. You know, none of my friends were experiencing symptoms at the time. So I just felt really alone. Anyway, after I'd processed this, I kind of dusted myself down and I became determined to learn and educate myself as much as I could about the menopause, ultimately with the intention of sharing my knowledge and helping to support other women in the same situation. So as I said, there have been a lot of positive changes over the last 5 years. And, you know, thanks to women like Davina McCall and Dr. Louise Newson, she's been an incredible pioneer of the menopause, and also Carolyn Harris. So things have changed, and women are starting to talk about it a lot more. It's becoming a lot more of an open topic, which I think is really, really heartening. But there is still also an awful lot to be done, and particularly in the workplace. And some of you may have heard of the recent survey, which involved 4,000 women, and they were all aged between 45 and 55 years old. And 10% of this sample, so 4,000 women, 10% said they'd actually left their jobs because of their menopausal symptoms, which is absolutely staggering. And to think about, you know, the amount of experience that those organisations are losing with those women, not to mention, you know, the loss of salary for those women, the loss of self-esteem, you know, and what happens to them once they've left their jobs. So yeah, as you can see, there's a lot that can be done still to support women at work, to help them through this phase, and then, you know, continue working. So, sorry, bear with me a moment. I'm just going to move my slides on. Oh, that was the introduction. Okay, before I get on to the important hormones, I just wanted to talk about the two terms perimenopause and menopause, because I know in the past that this has caused a little bit of confusion. So again, I'm just going to invite you to pop in the chat if you're happy to share what you believe the difference is between the perimenopause and the menopause. Helen's mentioned that her chat is disabled. Am I in the wrong? Maybe I'm in the wrong thing. I'm in Q&A. Let's see. No. Okay, here we go. They're coming through now. Menopause 1 year after having no periods. Some people say their chat's disabled. That's a shame. Peri's the start of things. Yeah. Okay. Okay, brilliant. One pre and one post. Yeah, lovely. So I'll just give you a quick definition, and I'm actually going to start with menopause because this is actually a marking of a period of time. So the menopause is 12 months after the last period, and the perimenopause is the run up to this period. And on average, it takes 4 years, but it can take as long as 10. So it's very different for each woman. Now, I'm just going to talk about the important hormones in play during the perimenopause and the menopause. I'll start with estrogen because this is the hormone that's most commonly associated with the menopause. And the main role of estrogen is to control the menstrual cycle and for childbearing. But women have estrogen receptors all over their bodies, and it has many roles within the body. So such roles are keeping the bones strong, the health of the brain and the hearts, and also the cardiovascular system. And estrogen helps to lubricate our joints and also reduce inflammation systemically around the body. And then next up, we've got testosterone. Now, testosterone is quite often thought of as the male hormone, but actually females really need testosterone too. And within the body, it has quite a few roles, but it contributes towards muscle and bone strength, our cardiovascular health, energy, our cognitive function, so it helps with concentration and mental focus, and also our libido. So when testosterone starts to drop, women can experience symptoms such as sluggishness, muscle weakness, tiredness, sleep disturbance, a decline in sex drive, and just a general kind of reduction in your drive and zest for life. So you kind of lose your va-va-voom. Actually, sorry, I'm going to skip back to estrogen again. I've just realised I forgot to talk about the symptoms of low estrogen. So low estrogen, one of probably the most commonly known symptoms with the menopause is hot flushes. And this is one of the symptoms of low estrogen. So hot flushes and sore joints, and also headaches, but depression and anxiety as well. I'm going to talk more about those later. Brain fog, tiredness, and vaginal dryness. Now, vaginal dryness, I'm going to talk a bit more about this later, but this is not just about sexual intercourse. It has many other kind of impacts and unpleasant side effects. So moving on, back to testosterone, now on to progesterone. Now, progesterone works with estrogen, and often it's the first hormone to start dropping off, but not always. And the major role of progesterone in the body is to prepare the body for conception of a baby and maintain a pregnancy. but it does have other roles as well within the body. And one of its sort of really valuable roles, if you like, is as a calming hormone. So it helps to sort of calm us down. And a disadvantage, I'm going to talk about cortisol as the last hormone, but when our cortisol levels are high, so when we're feeling stressed and the body's having to make more and more cortisol, it will sometimes start to steal the progesterone, which has a double whammy in terms of how a woman is feeling, you know, how stressed a woman is feeling. And that's why it's really important to try and manage our stress throughout the perimenopause and menopause. Easier said than done, I know. Anyway, so symptoms of high cholesterol include, progesterone. I'm jumping ahead of myself. Symptoms of low progesterone include sleep disturbance, mood swings, anxiety and depression, breast tenderness, and also night sweats, actually. So low progesterone causes night sweats as well, or can cause night sweats. And then lastly, I'm going to talk about cortisol, which isn't always spoken about in relation to the perimenopause, but I think it's important to talk about because it does have an impact on the balance of all the other hormones. So cortisol, it actually regulates a number of functions in the body, but it's probably best known as for its stress response, its response to stress. And when we are stressed, our cortisol levels rise. So if we're stressed for a long time, our cortisol levels are remaining high for a long time, but they can also fluctuate between being too high and too low. And this is a problem, obviously, in the menopause, because that will have an impact on our progesterone levels. It could have an impact on our estrogen as well. And symptoms of high cortisol include laying fat cells down around the abdomen. And this is kind of a classic symptom of the menopause. Women find they are starting to put more weight on around the tummy. So this can be one of the reasons, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about weight further on. And high cortisol also leads to sleep disturbance, high blood pressure, mood swings, and skin changes. So women find they're actually bruising more easily when they're really stressed. So appreciate I've just given you a lot of information there. So let me just summarize those 4 hormones. We've got estrogen, and that regulates many functions in the body and the brain. And then we have testosterone. So that's the hormone that gives us our kind of vavavoom and our zest for life. Progesterone, that's our calming hormone. And cortisol, it's the hormone that's released in response to stress. Okay. Now, I thought it would be helpful just to explain or show you in a graph how the hormones change over the lifespan of a woman. So as you can see, the decline is not linear. It's quite erratic in places for estrogen and progesterone. And this is when women will probably experience the most severe symptoms. Now, I've also added melatonin in there because sleep is a real issue for a lot of women in the perimenopause and menopause. And you can see that over time, the level of melatonin does start to decline. And this is actually for men and women. So it's not just an issue for women, it's for men as well. But for women, when you couple the decline in melatonin, sorry, I'll just rewind as well and say melatonin is a hormone that's released in response to darkness. So it helps us to sleep. So when you couple the decline in melatonin with the decline in estrogen and progesterone and their kind of sleep enhancing properties, you can see why a lot of women do really struggle to sleep throughout the perimenopause. I'm going to talk about sleep more later anyway. So next up, I'm going to talk about symptoms, and these can be absolutely miserable for a lot of women. And there are a wide range of symptoms. I've just put the most common up on this slide, and I'm not going to go through them all, but I'm going to pick out a few. So typically, most books and publications will quote a total of 34 possible symptoms. I mean, in some books, I have actually read more than that. So that's an awful lot of symptoms. But let me just pick out a few from the list. So I'm going to start with brain fog and poor concentration. And this probably has one of the biggest impact on women when they're at work. And, you know, in extreme cases, women will leave their jobs because they just don't feel they're capable of doing them anymore, because their cognitive function is so impaired by the brain fog, which, you know, again, is tragic. And bladder problems, again, these aren't talked about so much. I think, again, there's quite a lot of shame around this, but they are surprisingly common. And this can be either stress incontinence or urge incontinence. Now, stress incontinence is probably more commonly known, and particularly if you've had children, because a lot of women can suffer stress incontinence after childbirth. But urge incontinence is when you have that sudden need to go to the loo and you can't quite make it in time. And again, this can be really embarrassing for women, really debilitating. But there are things out there that can help you. So vaginal estrogen is probably the most obvious thing. And this has made a huge difference to some women's urge and stress incontinence. And the great news about vaginal estrogen is that it's safe for pretty much all women, not all women, but most women, because it's not absorbed systemically into the system. It's very localized. I was going to talk about hot flushes again, because they probably are the most common symptom, or the most obvious symptom that people think about with the menopause. And a lot of women do suffer from, I think it's 70% of women suffer from hot flushes. So a lot of women I've spoken to cite hot flushes as just a huge source of embarrassment when they're at work, you know, particularly if they're having to deliver a presentation or they're in a meeting. And not only are they really embarrassing, they're really uncomfortable. You know, women that I've spoken to have said afterwards, their clothes are drenched. And I have spoken to women who've had to take, you know, who regularly take a clean top into work in the instance when they do have a really, really nasty hot flush. So these can be really difficult to manage, particularly at work. Now, vaginal dryness, again, it is a common symptom. It's quite an embarrassing symptom to talk about, but it can be, again, debilitating for some women, and not just in relation to sexual intercourse. You know, I've read of some women who haven't been able to wear trousers before they haven't been able to wear trousers for years because they're just so sore in the vagina area, which, you know, I can't imagine how bad that would be. And then we've got urinary tract infections, so UTIs. And again, these aren't always associated with the menopause, but they are a surprisingly common symptom. And I met a lady last year who told me that she had such severe urinary tract infections through her perimenopause. There were times when she was actually passing pus with her urine and she was just in so much pain. Anyway, after a number of these infections and a number of doses of antibiotics, her doctor suggested that she tried vaginal estrogen. And again, this has just been absolutely revolutionary for her. And I believe she hasn't actually had another UTI since. So there's many benefits to taking vaginal estrogen. And then, not listed on here, but there are some more unusual symptoms that women wouldn't necessarily correlate with the menopause, like a burning mouth or a metallic taste in the mouth. There's crawling skin as well. And when women feel like they've actually got insects, you know, running around under their skin, which must just be hideous. Another symptom is tingling and numbness in the limbs, which is also a symptom of MS. So that can be quite a frightening symptom for some women. And also dry and itchy eyes, which can be very, very unpleasant. Okay, right, I'm just going to move on to HRT now. Now, HRT stands for hormone replacement therapy. And I just wanted to mention here that in case you didn't see it, Dr. Susanna Unsworth did a presentation for the Cambridge Biomedical Campus. I think it was in June time, and that was all about the menopause and also the benefits of HRT. So I do believe, and I'll check with Jill at the end, but I do believe that this is available on the Cambridge Biomedical Campus YouTube channel. So if you haven't seen it, it really would be worth taking a look at this webinar, because it was very interesting. So the reputation of HRT was seriously damaged in 2002 after a report claimed that the combined HRT, so that was a pill of estrogen and progesterone, which was synthetic HRT, it resulted in the risk of a small increased risk of breast cancer, heart disease, strokes and blood clots. Now, since then, and after this research, you know, you can imagine the media picked up on it and so many women were terrified. They ditched their HRT immediately, understandably. But since then, the credibility of this research has actually been questioned further down the line in terms of, you know, the people that were used in the research and the age of the women and all sorts of other factors. Anyway, fast forward 20 years, and thankfully there have been many advances in HRT, and there's been the introduction of body identical HRT, which is much much better for us, or easier for the body to recognise than the synthetic HRT. So what does body identical mean? Well, it basically means that they use the same chemical structure as the hormones that our bodies use. So it's easy for the body to recognise. Now, body identical HRT is actually available to all women in the country via the NHS. But unfortunately, as with quite a few medications, there is a postcode lottery. So, it's worth doing your research beforehand and checking what body identical hormones are available, and then speaking to your GP. It's also worth mentioning that there is still some fallout from this 2002 report, and some GPs are still very cautious to prescribe HRT. And it's also worth mentioning that there are groups of women that can't take HRT, such as those at risk of breast cancer or cervical cancer. But for the majority that can, it's life-changing for some women. That's the word that I've heard mentioned so many times. And in terms of health benefits to heart health, bone health, our cardiovascular system, reducing the risk of type 2 diabetes, all these health benefits do outweigh the risks for most women, not all women, but for most women. So, it's always worth having a discussion with your GP. And if you have, health complications, you might want to consider seeing a hormone specialist where you can get some more kind of, dedicated advice, which, someone like Dr. Susanna Unsworth, for example. Now, the good news is, with or without HRT, there are lots of positive steps that women can take to help and maximise their well-being throughout the menopause, but also into their third age and basically for the rest of their lives. And HRT is not a substitute for any of the topics that I'm going to talk about, but it's to be taken in conjunction with them. So I am going to start with my favourite exercise. And there are many reasons to exercise for our well-being, generally for men and women, but it becomes even more important for women during the peri and post-menopause phase, because exercise actually helps to mitigate some of the effects that the decline in estrogen has on the body. So I'll just quickly start with our mental well-being. So, as I mentioned, one of the symptoms of the perimenopause and the menopause is anxiety and depression. Now, when we exercise, it helps to release feel-good chemicals in our brain, which help to ease the symptoms of anxiety and depression. So, even if if you're suffering from mental illness at any other point in your life, exercise will be beneficial, but it's particularly valuable in the peri and post-menopause phase. And our heart and cardiovascular system. So as estrogen reduces, this has an effect on our heart and cardiovascular system, because estrogen has protective factors for our heart. But exercise helps to strengthen the heart and blood vessels, which again helps to mitigate the decline in estrogen. And just in case you don't know, heart disease is actually the biggest killer of women. And then, of course, we've got muscle mass. Now, muscle mass starts to decline rather depressingly from the age of 30, but it does start to really pick up pace from 40 years onwards. So we really want to keep working on muscles to make sure, well, basically we can do, the basic things like get up and down and in and out of a chair when we're aged 80. Now, exercise also helps to protect us against cancer and other illness. So exercise helps to regulate some hormones that can contribute towards the development of cancer. And there's been some research recently, and the results have come out which say that moderate exercise helps to reduce the risk of breast cancer by 30%, which is huge. And another great reason to exercise regularly. And also, of course, for brain health. So as we age, I mentioned we've got estrogen receptors and progesterone receptors in our brain, and exercise helps to improve the blood flow to the brain, and it helps to ease the symptoms of brain fog and forgetfulness and other kind of cognitive issues. So which are associated with the decline in estrogen. And it's also been shown to stop the buildup of plaques that are linked to dementia. So, again, another really powerful reason to keep exercising through the second phase of our lives, really. Bone density. Now, as estrogen, estrogen has some really powerful protective factors for our bones, and it helps to keep them strong. So as estrogen starts to decline, this has an impact on our bone strength. However, when we exercise, particularly sort of impact exercise and strength exercise, which pulls the muscles, which then affects the bones, this helps to the bone to rejuvenate itself and keep the bone strong. So again, yeah, another good reason to exercise. And I'll finish with weight gain. So during the perimenopause, women really are hit by a lot of factors that kind of work against them when it comes to weight. I mentioned earlier, like high cortisol levels, but also, you know, women do typically start to move a bit less in the perimenopause, and there's many reasons for this. But, you know, classic reasons are exhaustion because our hormones are changing, lack of time. You know, maybe you've still got young children at home. You've got a full-on career, you're perhaps at the top of your career. You may have aging parents that you're looking after as well, and it doesn't really leave much time to do very much for yourself at all. And of course, a lot of women experience sore joints. So, you know, couple all these things together with the decline of muscle mass going down. And I'll just mention here as well, a benefit of having more muscle mass is that they use more calories. So muscles are very expensive to maintain in terms of calorie consumption. So as our muscle mass starts to decline and we're moving less, this can result ultimately in weight gain. So, you know, there really are quite a few things stacking up against us. Anyway, bearing in mind all those reasons, what type of exercise do we need to be doing? Now, I'm going to bombard you with quite an extensive list, but I'll go through it slowly, I promise. So strength and resistance training, this helps to maintain our muscle mass. And this can be the form of like body weight exercises. So for example, squats or press ups, or it could be exercises with resistance bands, or even exercises with weights, you know, dumbbells or kettlebells. And if you don't have any weights at home, you can pick up some household items like bottles of water or a heavy saucepan. I had clients using heavy saucepans in lockdown when you couldn't get any weights online. So these exercises will help to maintain our muscle mass, which of course helps against weight loss as well, but more importantly, helps to keep us strong through our older age. And then we've got HIIT. Now, HIIT stands for high intensity interval training, and it uses quick bursts of intense exercise. And this really helps to improve our cardiovascular health, and it helps to prevent coronary heart disease and cardiovascular disease. And it's brilliant for fat burning, and it has something called an afterburn. So even for hours after you've exercised, your body will still be burning calories. And actually, that's the same for strength training as well. So you get extra bang for your buck. And my clients love high intensity interval training because it is quick and you get quick returns. And, you know, to be honest, even 10 minutes will make a difference. And most people can find 10 minutes in their day. Whether you choose to do it and spend it doing HIIT is another question, of course. But anyway, then, of course, we've got flexibility. Now, our flexibility, we do become stiffer with age, and there's a few reasons for this. We start to retain less water in our tissues, our joints start to stiffen. So there's a few things that start to, you know, work against us again. And it's really important to maintain flexibility. And you can do this in a number of ways. So regular stretching, I mean, I'd go as far as saying daily stretching actually, is worth its weight in gold in terms of helping to preserve our flexibility. But, you know, yoga is brilliant as well. And I know, again, it's difficult sometimes to find a class that works for you. And I've made a commitment to myself this September, because I have to be honest, yoga is not something I'm very good at, although I know it's very beneficial. And I've signed up to Yoga with Adrienne. She's got an app. She's also got lots of free stuff on YouTube. And I'm just trying to do 10 minutes a day because, as I said earlier, I can find 10 minutes a day in my day. Whether I choose to spend it doing yoga or not is another matter, but I know I should. But yoga is also really good for helping to regulate stress, because it has a really positive effect on reducing our cortisol levels. And next we've got grip strength. Now, this probably isn't something that's thought about so much, but it does decline with age. And grip strength is defined by how tightly and securely you can hold on to something. And there is specific equipment that you can buy, you know, on Amazon or whatever, that you can just use and squeeze, or you could use a tennis ball to squeeze. And it's a great little thing to do when you're on a call at work, or, you know, if you're watching telly at night, just work your grip strength. Or you can bring it into your everyday life if you're carrying heavy bags of shopping. And again, just focus on, you know, really working this bit here and gripping on tightly to your bags. Anyway, that's worth its weight in gold too. Balance. Now, balance does become more challenging with age, and there is a natural decline that will happen whether we exercise or not, and which makes it even more important to kind of focus on our balance, because that does help to preserve some of the neurons. You know, and we basically want to keep working our balance to help prevent falls as we get older. Now, one great thing to do is just to build in some practice throughout the day. So maybe when you're brushing your teeth or washing up, just stand on one leg for, you know, 30 seconds or 15 seconds or whatever, and switch between the legs, and just keep that proprioception going and that sense of balance. Now, if you do nothing else, walking for 30 minutes a day has been shown to have the greatest return on your health. And there's a brilliant little video on YouTube called 23.5 hours. Which is only 8 minutes long, and I'll send the link to Jill, but she can send it out with the notes afterwards, which is really worth watching. But it just clearly outlines all the advantages to our health of walking for just 30 minutes a day, and that can be broken into 2 lots of 15-minute walks. And I think it actually said 3 lots of 10 would be effective. So even if you don't have time to do 30 minutes all at once, you can break it down, and of course that's bearing in mind if you are physically able to walk. Of course, not everybody is. And lastly, I just wanted to talk about pelvic floor strength. The pelvic floor is a muscle just like any other that needs to be worked. But the pelvic floor has an extra sort of complication, if you like, in the sense that estrogen will have the decline in estrogen has an impact on our pelvic floor. For someone, which can feed into urinary incontinence. So I don't know if maybe you all know how to engage your pelvic floor, but I thought we'd just do a really quick exercise just to help you try and engage to it. So you can either sit down or stand up. I'm actually going to stand up because I find it easier to engage my pelvic floor. Ooh, standing. Sorry, I've lost my head. No bad thing. So let's just start with our toes turned in, and we're going to inhale to prepare. And then slowly exhale as you lift your pelvic floor, and just imagine drawing the pubic bone towards the coccyx. You lift the pelvic floor, and don't worry if you can't feel it. This does take practice. So again, let's just take one more practice here. So inhale, just relax everything, and then slowly exhale as you draw the pubic bone towards the coccyx and lift the pelvic floor. Now, after time, you'll start to feel that with your toes turned in, you'll feel this towards the front of the pelvic floor. So now we're going to change it up, and we're going to take our feet in this position. So heels together, toes turned out, and again, inhale as you're breathing in, relaxing the pelvic floor, and then slowly exhale, and just think about drawing the pubic bone towards the coccyx as you lift the pelvic floor. And hopefully after time, you'll feel that more towards the back of the pelvic floor. And then of course we can have our feet in parallel, and that's a more generic lift. So anyway, you could play with those three positions, and again, if you try and build them into, you know, a daily routine like brushing your teeth or washing up, it's just a helpful reminder to keep doing them. Basically, they are worth their weight in gold. And here's another horrible statistic: apparently, the second most popular reason for women being placed in old people's home is urinary incontinence. So if you've got kids, don't let them put you in for that reason. Okay, that is quite an overwhelming list, I do appreciate. And if you are starting from a low fitness level, I'd recommend really, you know, setting yourself some really small goals. So maybe, you know, 10 minutes of walking a day, just walk around the block for 10 minutes, or, you know, 5 squats a day. When you're waiting for the kettle to boil, do 5 squats. And over time, you'll start to be able to do more, and it's very, very encouraging. And just remember that something is always better than nothing, no matter how small. If it's 1 press up, that's better than doing none at all. Right, moving on to nutrition and why it matters. Now, there's a lovely expression that some of you may have heard called you can't out exercise a bad diet, which I'm afraid is very true. Now, what we eat becomes even more important as we age. And I did some training a few years ago, and I hadn't really thought about this, but when we hit our 40s, our digestive tract has aged by 40 years as well, which, you know, is quite a sobering thought, really. Anyway, so in our 40s, and particularly also it's important to mention there's estrogen receptors in the gut as well. They really are all over the body. We can notice that we become more sensitive to certain foods, and processed foods we probably can't tolerate as well as we used to either in our 20s. I mean, I look at some of the rubbish that my girls eat nowadays, and I just think, oh my word, you know, if I ate that, I would feel terrible. Anyway, the benefits of youth. So you may have noticed already that you're more sensitive to certain types of food, and you know, maybe you've noticed you've been experiencing more gas recently, more tummy aches, acid reflux. These are all signs of the change of the hormones and just not being able to tolerate certain types of food or processed food as well as we used to. Now, research has shown that the best diet for our health, overall health, whether you're in the perimenopause or you know, I don't know, a 20-year-old man, the best diet for your health is the Mediterranean diet. Sadly, not pizza and pasta though. So what this means is we need to increase our fibre. So the daily recommended amount of fibre is actually 30 grams a day for men and women. And I think the average consumption is 17 grams in the UK. So yeah, a lot of us are quite under the recommended amount. So you can increase fibre by adding more fruit and vegetables into your diet, more pulses, so lentils, chickpeas, kidney beans, all those kinds of things, more whole grains, so that's more brown rice rather than white rice, and more also more healthy fats, so olive oil, avocados, nuts. These are all great for our well-being. And of course, protein. Protein's really important. And you know, examples of protein are obviously meat, fish, pulses again, eggs, soybeans. They're a great source for vegans. Yes, we need to be thinking about including more of these types of foods in our diet. Now, what do we need to think about reducing? Okay, so we really want to cut back on sugar. Sugar is so inflammatory, and it's snuck into quite a lot of things nowadays as well. So processed foods, again, trying to cut back on processed foods as much as we can, because they often contain a lot of hidden sugar and also the bad fats that we want to avoid. So when I say bad fats, I mean trans fats or hydrogenated fats. And these are fats that are oils normally, and then the manufacturers have added hydrogen, and that makes them solid at room temperature. And the reason that manufacturers add this to food is that it gives it a longer shelf life, but it's not very good for us. So yeah, we want to be cutting back on processed foods as much as possible. And when I say processed foods, yeah, I'm talking about things like cakes and donuts that you buy in the supermarket. Margarine's not great, actually. Most people are better off having butter, and all the kind of microwave meals as well. So processed food puts more pressure on our digestive systems, and it also increases the amount of inflammation in our body. And some of you may have heard this statistic, but 70% of our immune system is actually sits in our gut. So our gut health really is quite important in terms of our overall well-being, and how well we can fight off colds and other viruses. So it's worth thinking about what we're putting in and how we're looking after our gut. I'll just quickly touch on alcohol. It is obviously lovely. Most of us do enjoy a glass of something or other. And just approach alcohol with caution. I mean, I do enjoy a glass of wine or gin and tonic, beer, even anything really. And I did have quite an indulgent summer, so I've put myself on dry September, just to help myself have a little reset and get out of the habit of drinking every day, really. So alcohol is a massive sleep disruptor in the perimenopause, and guess what? I'm sleeping better already. And most importantly, alcohol is a toxin to the body. sadly. So the liver will always process alcohol first. It will always work on getting that out of the body before it deals with other waste products like excess estrogen. So to give the liver the best chance of, clearing out all the other waste from our bodies, it's good to be mindful of how much alcohol we're consuming. And a lot of women also correlate alcohol consumption to an increase in our hot flushes. So maybe notice that as well. Now, caffeine is actually, it's got lots of good press recently in terms of having tea and coffee having health boosting properties. The only thing to be mindful of here is that it can, again, disrupt sleep. So if you are having trouble sleeping, it's probably worth keeping your caffeine consumption to the beginning of the day and perhaps really limiting it after 12 p.m. But again, it's an individual thing. See how it works for you. Another important thing to mention is if you are really stressed and you discover that your cortisol levels are high, it's worth, again, reducing the caffeine intake, because this can have a negative effect on our cortisol levels. I'll quickly talk about fizzy drinks as well. So both sugar-laden fizzy drinks and also diet drinks. Diet drinks kind of lull people into a false sense of security, because although they don't officially contain many calories at all, the body still thinks it's getting something sweet, so it will start to release insulin. And then when that when that sugar doesn't come into the bloodstream, we start to crave sugar even more. So just be mindful of how many fizzy drinks you're drinking. If you can start replacing 1 can a day or whatever with water, brilliant, or have them as an every now and then thing rather than as a daily thing. So again, that probably sounds a bit miserable, and I don't like being party pooper, but just think about eating, food in moderation. So nothing is forbidden, but thinking about the 80-20 rule. So thinking 80% of the time I'm going to eat, good food that's going to nourish me, and 20% of the time I'm going to enjoy that glass of wine, I'm going to enjoy that piece of cake and a bag of crisps, whatever. But just making sure that they're, for optimum health, they're down the lower end of the scale. Now, I wanted to talk about mental health, because this really is a debilitating symptom for quite a lot of women throughout the peri and post-menopause. And depression, anxiety, very, very common. So women are more predisposed to depression in the perimenopause and menopause if you've had previous depressive episodes, particularly if you've had postnatal depression, because you've got that hormone connection. And I'm just going to give you some really frightening statistics now. The highest rate of suicide in women is between the ages of 45 and 49 years. And the second highest rate is between the ages of 50 and 54. And those age groups just so happen to correlate with when our hormones, are going through that crazy flux in the perimenopause and then again later in the menopause. So and some women don't realise as well that they are feeling depressed because of that they're in the perimenopause. So always talk about this. And you never know that one of your friends might be feeling the same. Antidepressants are quite often offered as a solution to depression and anxiety in the perimenopause. But actually, it's different to clinical depression in the sense that it responds much more effectively to HRT than it does to antidepressants. And doctors are becoming, the knowledge is really spreading now, which is fantastic. And in fact, NICE, that stands for the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, they now say in their guidance that HRT should be the first choice when it comes to medically treating menopausal psychological symptoms. And they've actually said as well that there's no clear evidence that antidepressants ease low mood in the menopause. So that's quite a statement. Anyway, so why is this? Well, I think I've mentioned before that the brain has estrogen receptors as well, and estrogen also acts as a neurotransmitter in the brain. And the amygdala, which is the part of the brain that processes emotions, is packed full of estrogen and progesterone receptors. So when those hormones start to decline, that's when a lot of women can feel more anxious and more low in mood. And as well as anxiety and depression, some women may not experience anxiety and depression, but may experience brain fog, forgetfulness, or they may experience everything. And that is also due to the reduction of estrogen and testosterone reaching the hippocampus. That's another area of the brain. And for some women, this this drop in hormones and the symptoms of forgetfulness and brain fog can be so debilitating that they think they're developing early dementia, which is, terrifying. So I think, as I mentioned before, I've met women that have actually left their jobs because of their cognitive function, and they just feel they aren't equipped to deal with to do their jobs properly anymore, which is tragic. Now, eating well and exercising regularly do wonders for our mental well-being, and that's for men and women, but particularly to help mitigate, with the reduction of estrogen. And they work wonders for our mood and our cognition. Mental health is also significantly impacted, of course, by the amount of sleep we have. So I'm going to move on to sleep now. Now, sleep is certainly not for wimps. I know there was a big movement to kind of cut back on sleep and fit more into your day, and for some women that is a reality. They just have to, cut back on sleep. But actually, if we can try and reframe sleep as something that is crucial and non-negotiable for our physical and mental well-being, and I'd actually go as far as saying that it's the foundation of health, because when we don't have enough sleep, we haven't got the energy to exercise, we haven't got the motivation to exercise, our hormones fluctuate, and we start to crave more sugary foods and more carb-loaded foods, so white bread, white rice, potatoes, things that are going to give us that quick boost of energy. And just generally our willpower is lower, so we will make perhaps the less healthy choice when it comes to food, or we can't be bothered to cook ourselves a fresh meal. Understandably, we're knackered. So what does a good night's sleep do for the body? Well, it helps the body to carry out all the repair work. It strengthens our immune system, regulates our hormones, as I said. It sharpens our brain function, improves our emotional health. It increases our insulin sensitivity, which is really good news in helping to prevent type 2 diabetes, and it conserves and restores energy. Now, that's all very well, but a lot of women do really, really struggle to sleep during the perimenopause and the menopause. And of course, there are things that we can do to help ourselves. We can implement good sleep hygiene. We can stop using screens for an hour or two before bed. We can start to dim the lights to help our melatonin levels come up, and we can avoid caffeine. We can drink less alcohol. We can have less sugar, and that will help. But for some women, they cite HRT as the only thing that actually has a really significant impact on their sleep. Now, I'm coming to the end of my presentation now, and I'm aware that this has been a very brief dip into how to support women's physical and mental well-being throughout the menopause and into our third age and throughout our third age. And I just wanted to leave you with 3 key takeaways. Number 1, don't suffer in silence. Know what the symptoms are and seek help. And talk to a friend. You never know, they may be suffering in silence as well. Number 2, self-help. Exercise regularly, eat well, and make sleep a priority, and it really, really will help to make a difference in terms of alleviating your symptoms. And number 3, talk about the menopause. Keep talking about the menopause. Make it a conversation at home, a conversation with friends, and a conversation at work. It just helps to make more women feel comfortable and and feel supported. Okay, so I'm going to open up for questions now, and I'm going to go back to the chat. So please do put any questions in the chat, so the Q&A function, and let's see what comes through. Maybe Jill, you can shout a few at me if I miss anything.
Yes, I'm just looking at them. We've got one here. How can you do a Mediterranean diet best as a vegetarian?
Brilliant question. So obviously lots of pulses. So kidney beans, chickpeas, lentils. Building those in to your diet, and also cheese. Cheese is actually okay. It's fine. But obviously loading up on fresh fruit and vegetables, the whole grains as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Hope that helps.
It sounds very interesting. Will I continue to have periods whilst on HRT is another question that's come in.
Okay, some women do, yes. and then they'll gradually stop. But yes, some women do continue to have periods on HRT. It's quite an individual thing.
What would you say is another question? What would you say is the best type of exercise?
The best type of exercise? Oh, that's so tricky. Or maybe
if we should do one, if I
could only do one thing, it would be walking, because it's really functional. You know, you can get from A to B, you can build it into your routine, and it's a great way of catching up with friends. So my probably choice would be walking, if you do nothing else.
Okay, now we've got one here. I'm not sure if it's a question. She's saying, hi Emma, 2 difficulties. I've found diet, I'm vegetarian, and in a way you've just addressed that, and exercise. I'm having my right hip replaced next month. Good luck.
Right. Yeah, good luck.
I take vitamin supplements and try to eat enough protein to maintain muscle. I walk our dog daily and keep busy. So I'm thinking that this lady is sharing it with us rather than asking for anything. But have you got any comments to make on that?
No, I mean, after the hip replacement, you should be given physio exercises. And if not, I'm sure you can find some online to support the hip replacement. But yeah, definitely keep up with the physio exercises after the hip replacement to aid your recovery. But I mean, it's great that you're still able to walk. If there are any strength exercises you can still do, that's brilliant as well. In fact, I have got a client who is who's just turned 50, and she had a hip replacement, and she's just returned to exercise, but she had a lot of physio exercises to do beforehand. But it's encouraging actually seeing her, you know, squatting now. Lunging she still finds difficult, but she knows it's something she has to do to build up. Yeah.
Are there any particular types of food that help the skin and balancing hormones?
Okay, yeah, cruciferous vegetables are brilliant. So that's broccoli, cabbage, kale, all your kind of green foods, Brussels sprouts. They help the liver to kind of detoxify waste products. And as I spoke earlier, you know, cutting back on alcohol is really good, and that would be great for your skin as well. Sorry, I forgot the question again. Jill, do you mind?
Flick back, because I've already gone forward to the next one, or to the next several. Are there any types of food that help the skin and balancing hormones?
Yeah, so yeah, definitely all the cruciferous vegetables, but also protein, eating enough protein, and just trying to cut back on sugar and processed things. That will really help with the hormones.
Okay, so we've got some slightly medical questions here, and I have to say that neither of us is medically trained, so we cannot address any of those, I'm afraid, and I suggest you speak to your GP about that.
Yeah.
There's a question here: do you have any advice on eating more plant-based phytoestrogens?
Yeah, now that's interesting actually. I'll talk about this in my 6-week course. So some women have found these incredible in terms of helping to alleviate menopausal symptoms. And one that's particularly popular and easy to include in your diet are flax seeds. They're like the wonder food. And actually, if you go for milled flax seeds rather than whole flax seeds.
F-L-A-X?
Yeah, that's right, F-L-A-X seeds. You can add them to smoothies, you can put them in, you can shake them over, you know, your granola and yogurt and whatever. So they're really easy to consume, or you can stir them into yogurt. But the only advice I'd give is to build them up slowly, because they can create a lot of gas. There's other things. There's something called, some women sprout little seeds. So red clover is really good for as a kind of estrogen substitute. So there are certain plants that will boost our phytoestrogens, or are full of phytoestrogens rather, and help.
Lovely. Now, just please bear in mind, we are not giving any form of medical advice.
No.
This is just Emma talking about her experience. So please, if there's anything you need to clarify, please do so with your doctor. I've got a question here. You mentioned doing research on what is available, treatments in your area before speaking to your doctor. Where could I find this out? Okay.
What I actually meant was the types of body identical estrogen that's available on the NHS. So it's worth Googling body identical estrogen. That should give you a number of brands. And one thing I will also just say here is, if you don't get on with the first type of HRT, don't give up, because some women have to try a number of different HRTs before they find the one that actually suits them.
Now, Emma did mention earlier about Dr. Susanna Unsworth's webinar that she did for us, I think back in June. And what Emma said was correct. All of our previous webinars that have been recorded are on the CBC Cambridge Biomedical Campus YouTube channel. So if you Google that, don't Google CBC YouTube channel because you go through something in the States. Google Cambridge Biomedical Campus YouTube channel, and you will see all of our previous webinars on there. I've got a question here, and this sort of fits in with the menopause cafes that we're running on campus. This lady says, in my team, and we don't know if actually she's from the biomedical campus or not, but in my team we have quite a large female population that are perimenopausal stroke menopausal, and the idea is how to support a large group plus people that may not recognize that they could be in this group. So just before I pass that over to Emma, I will say that on the biomedical campus we are starting menopause cafes. We've started small in Cancer Research UK, and we are just we're just pushing this out. Next month there is National Menopause Day on the 18th of October. We've got one menopause cafe happening in the clinical school on site, one menopause cafe happening at CUH at Adam Brooks. And the day after, we've also got a menopause cafe happening at ABCAM, who are also on site. These are all open to anybody. So anybody is very welcome to turn up, have free coffee and cake and a chat. It's very relaxed. So in addition to that, Emma, is there anything you would like to add?
Yeah, so, well, one idea that's quite popular in companies is to have a menopause avatar, if you like. So a member of staff that's trained on the menopause, and that other members of staff feel they can go to in confidence and speak to them about, maybe problems they're having at work. It's also worth bearing in mind, flexible working, which of course has become much more accessible for companies post the pandemic. But, bearing in mind things like if women are having problems sleeping, but maybe they sleep really well from, say, 6 a.m. till 8 a.m, it might work better for them to start work at 10 o'clock rather than 9 o'clock, and just adjusting their working day. And again, just being mindful of ventilation, accessibility to fans, things like that are going to make them feel more comfortable. And I think the main thing is just to keep talking about the menopause, so it's not a taboo subject. Women can feel that they can, raise their their symptoms and discuss the difficulties they're having at work because of them.
Emma, thank you. Now, unfortunately, we have so many more questions coming in and we don't have time to answer them. Now, Emma is rerunning this webinar on Wednesday, the 19th of October at 12:30. And obviously the content will be the same, but there will be an opportunity for questions again. So please do submit your questions then. If you would like to contact me directly, contact me through Eventbrite, through the Eventbrite link for this, and I will collate your questions for Emma so that she can maybe bring them into her presentation next time. Would that be all right, Emma?
Absolutely, yeah. Lovely. Yeah, cool.
Okay, so I look forward to hearing from everybody, and I want to thank Emma for an amazing and an informative webinar. As I said earlier, our next CBC Wellness Campaign events are the monthly menopause cafes, and we are branching out now, going across the campus. The aim is to have one running every week somewhere on campus so that anyone on campus can go along and just receive some support along with a cup of something hot and a nice piece of cake. And I think we're hoping to do bacon sandwiches at the clinical school, but don't quote me on that. So lovely to have seen so many of you attending again today. Thank you very much again. And thank you again for Emma, and we'll see you next time. Keep your eye open for our events on Eventbrite. Take care now.